범죄자가 타인을 지배하는 가장 완벽한 수단은 폭력이 아닙니다. 바로 약점이죠. 제프리 앱스타인이 말하는 포식자의 철학은 단순했습니다.
The island was beautiful. There were some other beautiful young girls there. We all got together and we went to this really long table and started eating and hanging out, and that's when I met Jeffrey Epstein. When he said, "Oh, you lived in England for a while. Do you want to meet a prince?" There was a man that walked up at that moment, so he introduced me to him. It was very well known that Jeffrey knew princes.
Well, which one did you just meet?
I met a prince that was from England.
Andrew?
So after dinner, we went back to our quarters and got ready for bed. So everything was great. And so that's when there was a knock at the door. But you can also see with the other girls that something's not quite right. And they don't really want me to go because they probably know what's going to happen to me, but they can't protect me. But you can tell that he loved that. He loved that control and even the fear we had. He was just a brilliant mind. He doesn't talk the way most men talk. And everything he says is for a reason. Every question is calculated and strategic. And he had said to me, "Well, you know, Lisa, I like to have things on people." So I had always remembered that because, like, oh, he likes to have things on people. Is that why you record everything? Is that why all these cameras? I could see all the cameras everywhere. That didn't make sense to me till obviously now it makes sense to me, but it didn't really make sense to me then.
포식자는 당신의 결핍을 귀신같이 알아챕니다. 리사 필립스의 상처를 위로하는 척 다가온 앱스타인. 그것은 공감이 아니라 사냥을 위한 탐색이었습니다.
And so for people that aren't familiar with the story, I typically give people like a little intro in the beginning.
Okay.
So you are the host of the From Now On podcast, which is a podcast for other survivors to tell their stories and you give them a platform, which is awesome. You're also a speaker and advocate for survivors of sexual abuse. And your own story involves sexual abuse at the hands of Jeffrey Epstein, which we'll be talking about today, which was over like a 4-year period, you know, at the island in New York where you're a Ford model. Yeah, I guess there's a couple things that I hope we get out of this today. Number one is I hope that this is therapeutic for you, you know, to tell your story, like to me and to us, like our listeners here. Number two is I hope that somebody out there can take something away from it. You know, I know you do this on your show too, and like it's all done to help people. And you know, if there's somebody listening out there that's going through something similar currently, or they have, and they just haven't been able to process it, I hope they can take something away from it.
He sat down and he like laser focused right on me because I was the new girl and he knew everybody else there. And he knew everyone else there very well. And so he started talking to me probably just to feel me out, right? And I was always pretty sophisticated. I had this kind of elegance about me even when I was younger, just because I grew up in Europe for a lot of my life and came from this Air Force background where we hosted a lot of events or dinner parties and things like that. And so I was very cultured. And so I think he was intrigued by that and wanted to know a lot more of my story. And, you know, I let him know I lived a few years in Oxford and he found that interesting. And I knew a little bit about traveling and art. And I got to talk about, you know, all these wonderful things of my childhood and travels where, I mean, most guys, when you meet them, they don't ask you these kind of questions, right? It's more like on the surface types of things. And I mean, most guys don't really give a shit to really get to know you. Jeffrey did. But Jeffrey was like trying to go for those emotional things, like really asking about my family and my life. And I think he was really trying to see how connected I was to my family, what type of parental guidance or figures I really had in my life. And I wasn't close with my father. And he never really called me to check up on me. And I do remember talking about that kind of stuff because he triggered something in me. So we had a little bit of a bonding moment. I mean, in hindsight, that's the grooming process. But I mean, obviously I wasn't thinking like that at the time. I was just thinking, wow, a guy, you know, and he was more of a mentor, older type of fatherly figure to the girls. He was not a playboy. He wasn't the type where you're thinking he's just like a Hugh Hefner and making all these crude jokes and things like that. He was definitely, when he spoke to the group of girls, it was more of a mentoring thing about asking about, you know, your ambitions and things you really wanted to do That was his way of talking to you. It wasn't at all to make you feel uncomfortable. So in those couple hours, I felt really comfortable and I actually kind of liked the guy. I was like, wow, he was really interesting.
평생의 꿈을 이뤄주는 호의. 하지만 포식자의 선물은 공짜가 아닙니다. 나중에 치러야 할 끔찍한 대가에 비하면 이건 고작 입막음용 선급금일 뿐입니다.
And then finally he called me 4 months later. I think he was like, I'm not getting through to this girl. She's never going to come see me, but I've got to get this girl to come see me because she saw things on that island. I need this girl in my orbit. Like, you know, it doesn't work that way with Jeffrey Epstein. You're not able to go and meet with him and get away from him. You know, unless nothing happened, but something happened and I saw things. And I know that he was like not letting me get away. And so when he called me, I was like, oh, fuck. And I even remember where I was. I remember where I was standing. I was like after a casting. And I remember looking and I remember answering the 212 number and like, oh shit. But he's so brilliant. He's just so brilliant. Because he says to me, I remember what you said on the island, Lisa, what your big goal was and what your big dream was. And I know Katie Ford. She's a really good friend of mine. And I told her about you and she said she wants to meet you. And I remember being like, well, maybe he's not a bad guy. Maybe he feels bad about what he did. You know, I'm trying to rationalize it in my head. Like, well, this is a big thing. Why would he do this for me? So like, he just reeled me in because I was like, Katie wants to meet with me. Katie was the huge, big, daughter of Eileen and Jerry Ford. She was running the Ford modeling agency, this amazing, powerful agency down on Green Street in Soho, where I would just dream of going into. And so I have been working for that goal since I was 16 years old. So when Jeffrey said that to me, I was like, yes, I'll go. And so he was like, okay, gave me the information within a short period of time. I was over there meeting with Katie Ford. I remember going into the building and being like, wow, this is so cool. I remember I ran into Brad Croning in the office. He was a supermodel. He was so gorgeous. And I was like my model crush at the time. I was like, oh my gosh, Brad. I was like eating, cereal in your face this morning, and he was like laughing and stuff. We had this like exchange because I was, looking at him in the fashion magazine eating the cereal. So it was so surreal. And I remember he was like, it was just funny because, and then I walk in and I go up to there and they're like, wow, that Katie's waiting for you. And I just felt so good, and I think he set this all up for me, but it worked. And so, I met with Katie and she was like, I love Jeffrey. And I was just like, oh, wow, like people like that, like her love him. Like, I was like, yeah, me too. And then we had this little thing going, and then I met the agents, and then I switched from my agency over to Ford Models. It was just a big deal for me. That's Jeffrey Epstein.
진짜 지옥은 나를 사랑한다던 사람마저 내 고통을 외면할 때 완성됩니다. 가해자는 당신을 철저히 혼자로 만들어 저항할 의지마저 꺾어버립니다.
Something was so wrong with him. Like something like he was such a pervert. He was so perverted, that and people set this up for him. And he just didn't have any sense of like, what are you doing? Like, you ever think about those girls and how they got in that truck? Why are they naked and it's freezing cold out just for you? It's almost like those people knew he would get a kick out of it. So they play around like that with women, And he said, like, put his hand on my face like that. Like, I don't want to hear about it. And I remember in that moment being like, all that shame and all that unworthiness and came right back to me like, oh, I'm not good enough. Or like, why would someone who I love and I'm giving my life to, I'm expecting to be with for the rest of my life, didn't even want to listen to me. I mean, later he says it's because, I heard from him recently that it's because now I'm out there, it's because like I thought he was like a playboy and I didn't want to hear about your, being with this rich guy and all this stuff. Really? But I needed someone then. I needed someone to sit with me and be like, not judge me and just listen to like, what happened to you? As now, there's a lot There's a lot. He could have held space for me. He could have known everything about me. But our relationship just obviously fell apart after that because now I'm with someone who, you don't love me. There's no way. Or at least that's not the love I need.
수치심은 피해자의 것이 아니라 가해자의 오물입니다. 리사는 20년 만에 그 오물을 주인에게 되돌려 주었습니다. 이제 당신 차례입니다.
JP Morgan admitted to funding a sex trafficking ring. That's a fact. So there is a sex trafficking ring. But you know what he gave the survivors, 200 something of us? They gave us, thank you. You did us a favor. We'll come back to haunt you. They gave us 5 years of therapy. Any therapy we want, no matter how much it costs. And you know therapy is expensive. And therapy is what causes transformation in a human being. Not suppressing it. You get weaker. Illnesses and diseases and all sorts of stuff happens when you suppress horrible abuse or trauma that happens to you. But look what happens when you give us therapy. You know what I mean? You know how much that would cost? But we have free therapy. I don't know if people know that, but I want people to know that. The powerful women that you saw at the hearing at Congress was because we've had therapy, like really good therapy. So that's transformational. And that's where the power is coming from. We keep telling our story to a therapist, putting it away, releasing the shame, getting into our power. You just watch out now because you're turning these survivors into powerful people that have platforms now who aren't holding back anymore. We're fed up. We're here and we're not going to back down anymore because things are going to happen. There may not be accountability with the full list of powerful people, but we're going to start chipping away as they have to. They're releasing things little by little, so we're chipping away at it, so it makes us feel better. It makes us come into our power a little bit better. And the most important thing is we're healing.